The first piece of forbidden evidence lies in the maps themselves. In 1657, a Dutch cartographer, Nicolaas Visscher, published a world map that, according to modern history, shouldn't exist. Visscher's map shows Tartaria stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, covering an area larger than any empire in recorded history. These maps weren't depicting a collection of scattered tribes or a geographical expression. They were documenting a functioning civilization with the organizational capacity to control vast territories. What makes these maps particularly compelling is their consistency across different cartographers, countries, and decades. French mapmakers, Dutch explorers, and German geographers all independently confirmed Tartaria's existence and approximate boundaries. This wasn't a case of one mapmaker copying another's mistakes. These were independent observations of the same geopolitical reality. But here's where the evidence becomes disturbing. By the early 19th century, Tartaria had vanished from every map. Not gradually, not through documented conquest or political dissolution, but completely and suddenly. The territory that had been consistently mapped for over 200 years simply disappeared from cartographic records without explanation. The official story claims that Tartaria was never a real empire, just a vague geographical term that mapmakers used incorrectly. Yet this explanation requires us to believe that the most skilled cartographers in history, working across multiple countries and centuries, all made the exact same massive error in documenting a fictional empire. The second piece of evidence lies in the architectural impossibilities that surround us. Every major city on Earth contains buildings that official history claims were constructed during periods when such architectural achievements should have been impossible. The level of precision, the scale of construction, and the advanced engineering techniques displayed in these structures cannot be explained by the primitive technology allegedly available to their supposed builders. Consider the star forts found on every continent. These geometric marvels feature complex angular designs with mathematical precision that requires advanced understanding of structural engineering, ballistics, and materials science. Official historians tell us these forts were built between the 16th and 18th centuries by various European powers as military fortifications. But this explanation collapses under scrutiny. The star forts in Sri Lanka are identical to those found in the Netherlands. The fortifications in Brazil mirror those constructed in Portugal. The defensive structures in North America match those built in Western Europe. This isn't architectural influence or cultural exchange. This is standardized engineering applied globally with mechanical precision that suggests a single organizing authority with unified construction protocols. The mathematical complexity of these structures goes far beyond military necessity. The geometric patterns align with acoustic principles, electromagnetic field theory, and resonance frequencies that weren't officially discovered until centuries after these forts were allegedly built. The angles, proportions, and spatial relationships embedded in their design demonstrate knowledge of physics and engineering that surpasses what conventional history attributes to their supposed builders. More disturbing is the fact that many of these star forts serve no practical military purpose given their locations and orientations. They're positioned away from strategic trade routes, face directions that don't align with historical threat patterns, and incorporate design elements that would actually hinder rather than help defensive operations. Their true purpose appears to have been something entirely different from military fortification. The third piece of evidence emerges from the photographic record of the 19th century. Thousands of photographs from this period document a world that doesn't match the official historical narrative. These images show fully developed cities appearing seemingly overnight, massive construction projects completed with impossible speed, and architectural achievements that couldn't have been accomplished with the technology allegedly available. The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago presents the most glaring example. Official records claim that hundreds of elaborate buildings covering over 600 acres were designed and constructed in just 2 years. These weren't simple wooden structures or basic pavilions. These were massive neoclassical buildings with intricate stonework, elaborate facades, and sophisticated engineering systems including electricity, running water, and advanced ventilation. The official explanation requires us to believe that in 1891, Chicago was a frontier city with limited infrastructure and construction capabilities. Yet by 1893, it had produced architectural marvels that rivaled anything in Europe, complete with advanced utilities and engineering systems that wouldn't become standard for decades. The photographs show these buildings not as hastily constructed temporary structures, but as permanent, sophisticated architectural achievements with the kind of weathering and settling that suggests they had been standing for much longer than 2 years. What makes this evidence even more compelling is that similar photographic anomalies appear in cities worldwide during the same time period. San Francisco, St. Louis, Buffalo, and dozens of other cities held World's Fairs, featuring identical architectural styles and construction techniques. The buildings were allegedly designed and built independently by different architects in different cities, yet they shared the same proportions, the same decorative elements, and the same advanced engineering solutions. The fourth piece of evidence lies in the technology that these structures demonstrate. The buildings attributed to the 19th century display engineering capabilities that officially weren't developed until the 20th century or later. Advanced steel framework construction, sophisticated heating and cooling systems, and electrical infrastructure that predates the widespread adoption of electric power all appear in structures that official history claims predate these technologies. The domed buildings found in every major city demonstrate acoustic engineering principles that require advanced understanding of sound waves, resonance, and architectural acoustics. These aren't simple religious or government buildings. They're sophisticated acoustic instruments designed to manipulate sound frequencies for purposes that extend far beyond conventional architecture. The metal framework visible in many 19th century buildings shows construction techniques that allegedly weren't invented until decades later. The precision of the metalwork, the complexity of the joint systems, and the integration of multiple materials demonstrate manufacturing capabilities that don't align with official technological timelines. Most significantly, many of these buildings contain evidence of wireless electrical systems. Photographs show metal rods, conductors, and antenna-like structures integrated into the architecture that appear designed for electromagnetic energy collection and distribution. These systems predate official wireless technology by decades, yet they demonstrate sophisticated understanding of electromagnetic principles and energy transmission. The fifth piece of evidence comes from the orphan trains and population anomalies of the late 19th century. Between 1850 and 1920, massive numbers of children were transported across North America, Europe, and Australia through programs that official history describes as charitable efforts to find homes for orphaned children. But the scale and systematic nature of these operations suggests something far more significant than simple child welfare programs. Over 250,000 children were relocated through these programs, often to remote rural areas where their origins couldn't be traced or verified. Many of these children showed no signs of poverty, malnutrition, or neglect that would be expected from genuine orphans. Photographs from the period show well-dressed, healthy children being distributed through what appears to be a massive population redistribution program rather than orphan care. The timing of these relocations coincides exactly with the period when Tartarian structures were being repurposed and given new historical backstories. The children were placed in communities that were simultaneously experiencing rapid development and construction of infrastructure that official history claims was being built by these same communities. This suggests a coordinated effort to populate areas after some kind of demographic disruption while simultaneously constructing the narrative of local development and growth. The massive orphanages built during this period provide additional evidence of something beyond conventional child welfare. These institutions were architectural marvels that rivaled government buildings and private mansions in their scale and sophistication. The resources required to construct and maintain such elaborate facilities for orphan care seems disproportionate to the supposed charitable purpose, suggesting these buildings serve functions that extended beyond their official designation. The documentation gaps surrounding these children's origins, the systematic nature of their placement, and the correlation with infrastructure development patterns all point to a coordinated program designed to repopulate areas and establish new historical narratives, while erasing evidence of whatever demographic disruption had occurred. This is just the beginning of the evidence that proves Tartaria existed and was deliberately erased from history. What we've examined so far represents only the surface level of a conspiracy so vast and systematic that it required the coordination of governments, academic institutions, and cultural organizations across multiple continents and centuries. The remaining pieces of evidence reveal not just that Tartaria existed, but why it had to be destroyed, and who orchestrated its erasure from human memory. The sixth piece of evidence lies buried in the mud flood phenomenon that swept across the globe during the early 19th century. Cities worldwide show unmistakable signs of massive sediment deposits that buried entire ground floors of buildings, submerged doorways, and covered architectural elements that were clearly designed to be visible at street level. This wasn't gradual environmental change or normal geological processes. This was a coordinated catastrophic event that fundamentally altered the landscape and provided cover for the systematic erasure of Tartarian civilization. Walk through any major city today and you'll notice something disturbing. Basement windows that were obviously designed as ground floor windows. Staircases that descend below street level to reach what were clearly main entrances. Architectural details and decorative elements positioned far below current ground level that make no sense unless these buildings were originally constructed at a much lower elevation. The official explanation claims these features result from normal urban development and street-level adjustments over time. But the scale and uniformity of burial across different continents and climate zones defies this rational explanation. Buildings in Boston show the same burial patterns as structures in Istanbul. Architecture in St. Petersburg displays identical submersion characteristics to buildings found in San Francisco. The mud flood evidence becomes even more compelling when you examine the photographic record from the late 1800s. Images from this period show massive excavation operations in cities worldwide, with crews digging out buildings that appear to have been buried for decades or longer. These weren't construction projects or infrastructure improvements. These were archaeological recovery operations designed to uncover and repurpose existing structures. What makes this evidence particularly damning is the speed and coordination of these excavation efforts. Cities across multiple continents simultaneously began massive digging operations during the same narrow time window. The organizational capacity and resources required for such coordinated global excavation suggest this wasn't random urban development, but a systematic program designed to recover and reappropriate buried Tartarian infrastructure. The seventh piece of evidence emerges from the energy systems embedded in Tartarian architecture. These buildings weren't just constructed with advanced engineering techniques. They were designed as functional energy generation and distribution systems that could harvest unlimited power from atmospheric electromagnetic fields and distribute it wirelessly throughout entire urban areas. The metal poles, rods, and antenna structures visible on Tartarian buildings weren't decorative elements or simple lightning rods. They were sophisticated atmospheric energy collectors designed to capture and concentrate electromagnetic radiation from the environment. The positioning, angles, and materials of these devices demonstrate advanced understanding of electromagnetic field theory that officially wasn't developed until the 20th century. The domed structures found atop government buildings, churches, and public institutions across the globe functioned as resonance chambers and energy distribution nodes. The geometric proportions of these domes align with specific acoustic frequencies that could manipulate electromagnetic fields and create standing wave patterns for energy transmission. The mathematical precision required for such engineering surpasses anything achieved by conventional architecture. The chimneys and ventilation systems in Tartarian buildings show clear evidence of electrical rather than combustion-based operation. The metal backing plates, conductor pathways, and airflow designs indicate these systems were designed to ionize air and create pressurized electromagnetic fields, rather than simply remove smoke and provide ventilation. The integration of these electrical systems with the overall architectural design demonstrates that unlimited free energy was the foundational technology underlying Tartarian civilization. This energy technology explains how Tartarian society could devote such massive resources to architectural achievement while maintaining global infrastructure across vast geographical distances. Unlimited free power would eliminate the resource constraints that limit conventional civilizations and enable the kind of massive construction projects and technological development that Tartarian ruins demonstrate. The eighth piece of evidence comes from the systematic destruction campaigns that followed both world wars. Official history presents these conflicts as geopolitical struggles between nation-states, but the targeting patterns and destruction outcomes reveal a coordinated effort to eliminate remaining Tartarian structures and complete the erasure process that began in the 19th century. The bombing campaigns of World War II specifically targeted cities with the highest concentrations of Tartarian architecture. Dresden, with its elaborate Baroque buildings and sophisticated urban planning, was systematically destroyed despite having minimal military significance. The targeting patterns prioritized cultural and architectural destruction over strategic military advantage, suggesting objectives that extended beyond conventional warfare. The reconstruction efforts following these conflicts replaced destroyed Tartarian structures with modern buildings that bore no resemblance to the original architecture. The speed and scale of these reconstruction programs, combined with the complete abandonment of traditional architectural styles, indicates a coordinated effort to eliminate visual evidence of pre-war technological capabilities. What makes this evidence particularly compelling is the simultaneous nature of these destruction and reconstruction programs across multiple countries and continents. Cities that had maintained Tartarian architectural elements for centuries suddenly lost these features within the narrow time frame of the world wars, regardless of which side they supported in the conflicts or what level of actual combat they experienced. The ninth piece of evidence lies in the population reset programs that accompanied the mudflood and destruction campaigns. The massive orphan redistribution operations were just one component of a larger demographic engineering project designed to repopulate areas with people who had no connection to or memory of Tartarian civilization. Immigration patterns during the late 19th and early 20th centuries show coordinated population movements that don't align with economic opportunities, political persecution, or other conventional migration drivers. Large groups of people were systematically relocated to areas that had recently undergone mudflood excavation or infrastructure appropriation, suggesting these movements were designed to establish new populations with no historical knowledge of previous inhabitants. The education systems established during this period focused heavily on promoting specific historical narratives while discouraging investigation into local history or architectural origins. School curricula emphasized recent immigration and settlement stories while systematically ignoring evidence of earlier advanced civilizations. This educational programming created generations of people who accepted official historical narratives without questioning obvious contradictions in their immediate environment. The cultural institutions established during this reset period, including museums, libraries, and historical societies, promoted specific versions of local history that aligned with the official narrative of recent settlement and gradual development. These institutions actively discouraged research into alternative historical interpretations and controlled access to documentation that might contradict official timelines. The 10th and most damning piece of evidence lies in the ongoing suppression efforts that continue today. The systematic removal of Tartarian evidence didn't end with the population resets and architectural destruction of the early 20th century. It continues through modern academic institutions, media organizations, and cultural gatekeepers who actively discourage investigation into these historical anomalies. Archaeological expeditions that uncover evidence inconsistent with official historical timelines face funding cuts, permit revocations, and academic persecution. Researchers who publish findings that suggest advanced pre-modern civilizations encounter career destruction and institutional blacklisting. The peer review process in academic publishing systematically excludes research that challenges established historical narratives, regardless of the quality of evidence presented. The digitization of historical records has enabled unprecedented control over access to primary source documents. Images, maps, and records that contradict official narratives disappear from digital archives or become inaccessible through technical restrictions. The transition from physical to digital record keeping has created opportunities for systematic evidence removal that would have been impossible during previous eras. Modern construction and urban development projects systematically destroy remaining Tartarian structures under the guise of progress and modernization. Buildings that survived the conflicts and destruction campaigns of the 20th century now face demolition through development projects that prioritize profit over historical preservation. The pace of this destruction has accelerated dramatically in recent decades, suggesting urgency to eliminate remaining physical evidence. The patterns revealed by these 10 pieces of evidence paint a clear picture of coordinated suppression that has operated continuously for over 2 centuries. The erasure of Tartarian civilization wasn't a single event or random historical accident. It was a systematic program of evidence destruction, population manipulation, and narrative control that required resources and coordination that could only be provided by the most powerful institutions on Earth. The question isn't whether this suppression occurred. The evidence proves that it did. The real question is why such enormous efforts were invested in hiding this knowledge from humanity, and what forces possess the power to coordinate such a massive deception across multiple continents and generations. The answer lies in what Tartarian technology represented to the power structures that emerged in its aftermath. Free, unlimited energy doesn't just threaten utility companies and fossil fuel industries. It eliminates the fundamental basis of economic control that allows small groups of people to dominate entire populations. When energy becomes freely available to everyone, the scarcity-based economic systems that concentrate wealth and power become impossible to maintain. The Tartarian energy grid wasn't just about powering buildings or cities. It was about creating a civilization where abundance replaced artificial scarcity as the organizing principle of society. The domed structures, metal antenna systems, and electromagnetic infrastructure that covered the Earth represented a technology that could make every person energetically independent. No utility bills, no dependence on centralized power generation, no vulnerability to energy shortages or price manipulation. This technological independence extended far beyond energy production. The resonance frequencies generated by Tartarian architectural systems appear to have influenced human consciousness and biological functioning in ways that promoted health, mental clarity, and spiritual development. The geometric proportions embedded in their buildings weren't just aesthetically pleasing. They were designed to create environmental conditions that enhanced human potential rather than suppressing it. The suppression of this technology becomes understandable when you consider what it would mean for modern control systems. Pharmaceutical companies couldn't profit from treating diseases that wouldn't develop in properly resonant environments. Financial institutions couldn't create debt-based economic systems when abundant resources eliminated artificial scarcity. Political structures couldn't maintain authority when populations possessed the technological means for complete independence. The forces responsible for Tartarian erasure weren't motivated by conquest in any conventional sense. They were motivated by the need to prevent humanity from accessing technologies and knowledge that would make traditional power structures obsolete. The mud floods, population resets, and architectural destruction weren't random catastrophes. They were strategic operations designed to eliminate specific technological capabilities while preserving enough infrastructure to support a more controllable civilization. The coordination required for such a massive undertaking reveals the existence of organizational structures that operate above and beyond any single government or institution. The systematic nature of the suppression, spanning multiple continents and centuries, indicates planning and resource allocation that exceeds the capabilities of conventional political or economic entities. This wasn't the work of any single nation or corporation. This was a collaborative effort by interests that transcend normal geographical and institutional boundaries. Modern academic institutions play a crucial role in maintaining this suppression through systematic misdirection rather than outright censorship. The peer review process, funding mechanisms, and career advancement systems in universities create environments where researchers naturally avoid investigations that might challenge established narratives. You don't need to explicitly forbid research into Tartarian civilization when the entire academic reward system punishes such investigations and promotes research that supports official historical timelines. The archaeology departments at major universities receive funding primarily from sources that have vested interests in maintaining current historical narratives. Energy companies, financial institutions, and government agencies provide grants and research opportunities that steer investigation toward approved topics while making alternative research financially impossible. Graduate students quickly learn that career advancement requires avoiding certain subjects, regardless of the evidence they might uncover. The museum and cultural institution networks operate similar filtering mechanisms. Collections are curated to support specific historical interpretations, while artifacts that might contradict official narratives are stored in archives, where public access is restricted or eliminated entirely. The presentation of historical information through exhibits and educational programs reinforces approved timelines, while making alternative interpretations seem fringe or unsupported by evidence. The digital information ecosystem has created unprecedented opportunities for evidence manipulation and access control. Search algorithms prioritize results that support mainstream historical interpretations, while burying or eliminating content that presents alternative evidence. The transition from physical libraries and archives to digital databases has enabled systematic removal of documents, photographs, and records that might support investigation into suppressed historical topics. Social media platforms and content distribution systems employ sophisticated filtering mechanisms that reduce the visibility of information challenging official historical narratives. Content creators who investigate suppressed historical topics face demonetization, shadow banning, and algorithm suppression that limits their ability to reach audiences interested in such information. The economic incentives of digital platforms align with maintaining approved historical narratives rather than promoting open investigation. The mainstream media organizations that control information distribution to mass audiences maintain consistent messaging about historical topics that discourages investigation into alternative interpretations. Documentaries, news programs, and educational content consistently present historical development as gradual linear progress, while avoiding examination of technological capabilities that might suggest more advanced earlier civilizations. The educational curriculum development at primary and secondary levels ensures that new generations learn approved historical narratives without encountering information that might promote questioning of official timelines. Textbook publishing, standardized testing, and teacher training programs all reinforce specific historical interpretations while systematically excluding evidence or perspectives that might challenge established narratives. Professional licensing and certification requirements for historians, archaeologists, and related fields create career consequences for researchers who publish findings inconsistent with approved historical frameworks. Academic conferences, professional journals, and research symposiums maintain intellectual environments where challenging established historical narratives becomes professionally dangerous, regardless of supporting evidence. The legal framework surrounding archaeological investigation and historical preservation often restrict access to sites and artifacts that might provide evidence inconsistent with official historical timelines. Permit requirements, property restrictions, and regulatory oversight create barriers that prevent independent researchers from conducting investigations that might uncover suppressed evidence. International coordination between academic institutions, cultural organizations, and government agencies ensures that suppression efforts remain consistent across different countries and political systems. Educational exchange programs, research collaborations, and institutional partnerships spread approved historical narratives globally while preventing the development of alternative historical research in any major academic center. The financial systems that control research funding, publication costs, and institutional support create economic pressures that naturally discourage investigation into suppressed historical topics. Researchers who want to maintain their careers and support their families learn to avoid subjects that might threaten their access to funding and professional opportunities. The technological capabilities available to modern surveillance and information control systems enable monitoring and suppression of alternative historical research that would have been impossible during earlier eras. Digital communications, online research activities, and electronic publications can be tracked and controlled in ways that allow identification and neutralization of potential threats to approved historical narratives. The evidence for systematic Tartarian suppression extends far beyond any single smoking gun or obvious conspiracy. It emerges from the cumulative pattern of institutional behaviors, technological capabilities, and organizational structures that consistently work to prevent public access to information about advanced historical civilizations, while promoting narratives that support current power structures and economic systems. This isn't about believing in fantastic conspiracy theories or rejecting rational analysis. This is about recognizing that the same forces that control information, education, and resource distribution in the present day possess the motivation and capability to shape historical narratives in ways that serve their interests rather than promoting accurate understanding of human development and technological capabilities. The suppression continues because the stakes remain as high today as they were during the original erasure operations. Widespread public awareness of Tartarian civilization and technology would inevitably lead to questions about why such capabilities were eliminated and who benefits from maintaining current technological limitations. These questions would threaten the fundamental basis of modern economic and political control systems in ways that make continued suppression not just preferable but absolutely necessary for maintaining existing power structures. The systematic nature of this suppression becomes even more apparent when you examine the linguistic manipulation that has occurred alongside the physical evidence destruction. The very words we use to describe historical periods, architectural styles, and technological development have been carefully crafted to support the official narrative while making alternative interpretations linguistically impossible. Consider how the term Tartary itself has been redefined and marginalized. Historical documents clearly reference Tartary as a political entity with defined territories, governing structures, and cultural institutions. But modern academic discourse has transformed this term into a vague geographical expression that supposedly never represented any actual civilization. This linguistic sleight of hand allows historians to acknowledge the existence of historical references to Tartary, while simultaneously denying that these references describe a real empire. The architectural terminology used to classify Tartarian buildings represents another layer of linguistic manipulation. Structures that demonstrate clear technological and stylistic unity across vast geographical distances are categorized using terms like neoclassical, Baroque, or Moorish revival that emphasize supposed European origins while ignoring the mathematical precision and engineering sophistication that suggests a single organizing technological tradition. These classification systems create artificial divisions between buildings that share obvious design principles, construction techniques, and technological features. By fragmenting Tartarian architecture into supposedly separate regional styles, mainstream historians can avoid confronting the implications of global architectural standardization that could only result from unified technological authority. The chronological frameworks used to date these structures rely heavily on documentation that was created or modified during the very period when Tartarian erasure was occurring. Carbon dating and other scientific methods that might provide independent verification are rarely applied to architectural elements, while documentary evidence from the 19th and early 20th centuries is accepted without question, despite being produced during the height of the suppression campaign. The technological terminology used to describe the capabilities demonstrated by Tartarian structures has been systematically limited to exclude concepts that might suggest advanced energy manipulation or electromagnetic engineering. Architectural historians describe domes, spires, and metal frameworks using purely aesthetic or structural language, while avoiding analysis of their potential electromagnetic or acoustic properties. Educational institutions have created entire academic disciplines organized around maintaining these linguistic barriers. Art history, architectural history, and historical archaeology all operate within conceptual frameworks that make serious investigation of Tartarian civilization academically impossible. Students entering these fields learn approved terminology and analytical methods that prevent them from recognizing evidence that doesn't fit established narratives. The peer review process in academic publishing functions as a linguistic enforcement mechanism that ensures research conclusions remain within approved conceptual boundaries. Papers that use terminology or analytical frameworks suggesting advanced pre-modern civilizations face rejection regardless of their evidential quality. The academic vocabulary itself has been structured to make certain conclusions literally unthinkable within professional discourse. Popular media representations of history consistently use language that reinforces official timelines while making alternative interpretations seem absurd or fantastical. Television documentaries, educational programming, and historical fiction all employ narrative frameworks that present technological development as gradual linear progress, while treating suggestions of earlier advanced capabilities as entertainment rather than serious historical investigation. The translation and interpretation of historical documents from non-English sources creates additional opportunities for linguistic manipulation. Primary sources in Russian, Chinese, Arabic, and other languages that might contain references to Tartarian civilization are translated using modern conceptual frameworks that obscure or eliminate evidence that doesn't support official narratives. Digital search algorithms and information retrieval systems have been programmed to prioritize results that use approved terminology while bearing content that employs alternative linguistic frameworks for describing historical development. The very structure of online information access has been designed to reinforce official historical narratives while making alternative interpretations difficult to discover or research. The international standardization of academic terminology through organizations like UNESCO and various scholarly associations ensures that linguistic manipulation remains consistent across different countries and educational systems. Historical research worldwide employs the same conceptual limitations that prevent recognition of evidence suggesting advanced historical civilizations. Professional certification and licensing requirements for translators, historians, and archaeological interpreters create career consequences for individuals who might employ alternative linguistic frameworks or interpretive approaches that could reveal suppressed historical information. The economic incentives of professional advancement naturally discourage linguistic innovation that might challenge established historical narratives. The legal language used in heritage preservation, archaeological protection, and cultural resource management consistently employs terminology that limits investigation and preservation efforts to approved historical frameworks. Laws and regulations governing historical research use definitional structures that make protection or serious study of potential Tartarian sites legally impossible. But the linguistic manipulation extends far beyond academic and professional terminology. The everyday language that ordinary people use to discuss history, architecture, and technological development has been shaped to make recognition of Tartarian evidence psychologically difficult. We've been taught to think about historical progress in ways that make advanced ancient civilizations seem impossible rather than simply suppressed. The religious and spiritual terminology available in modern discourse has been similarly constrained to prevent recognition of the consciousness-affecting properties that Tartarian architecture appears to have possessed. The acoustic and electromagnetic effects produced by domed structures and geometric architectural layouts are described using purely physical or aesthetic language that avoids any suggestion of intentional consciousness, manipulation, or enhancement. The economic terminology used to discuss resource allocation, energy distribution, and technological development consistently assumes scarcity-based models that make the abundance-based systems suggested by Tartarian energy technology conceptually impossible. Modern economic discourse lacks the vocabulary necessary to seriously consider civilizations organized around unlimited free energy and resource abundance. The political language available for discussing governance, social organization, and institutional authority assumes hierarchical control structures that may have been unnecessary in civilizations with unlimited energy and enhanced human consciousness. The possibility that Tartarian society operated according to completely different organizational principles becomes literally unthinkable within current political discourse. The scientific terminology used to describe energy, consciousness, and technological capability has been limited to exclude concepts that might explain how Tartarian systems actually functioned. Physics, engineering, and biological sciences employ conceptual frameworks that make serious investigation of resonance-based technologies, consciousness-matter interactions, and electromagnetic biological effects professionally dangerous. The psychological terminology available for discussing human potential, consciousness development, and environmental influences on mental function has been structured to avoid recognition that architectural environments might systematically affect human cognitive and spiritual capabilities. The idea that buildings could be designed as consciousness enhancement technologies becomes psychologically inconceivable within approved psychological frameworks. This comprehensive linguistic manipulation represents perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the Tartarian suppression campaign. By controlling the very words and concepts available for discussing historical evidence, the suppression system ensures that even researchers who encounter compelling evidence lack the conceptual tools necessary to properly interpret or communicate their findings. The linguistic barriers operate automatically without requiring conscious participation from individual academics, educators, or researchers. People naturally use the terminology and conceptual frameworks they learned during their education and professional training. The suppression system doesn't need to actively censor individuals when it can simply ensure that they lack the linguistic tools necessary to recognize or describe suppressed evidence. Breaking through these linguistic barriers requires conscious effort to develop new vocabulary and conceptual frameworks for describing evidence that doesn't fit approved historical narratives. It means learning to see architectural, technological, and social evidence without the interpretive filters that have been embedded in conventional academic discourse. The resistance to alternative historical frameworks isn't primarily intellectual or evidential, it's linguistic and psychological. People reject evidence for Tartarian civilization not because the evidence is weak, but because they lack the conceptual vocabulary necessary to process information that contradicts their fundamental assumptions about historical development and technological progress. Understanding the Tartarian suppression requires recognizing that it operates through multiple simultaneous mechanisms, including physical evidence destruction, institutional control, economic pressure, and linguistic manipulation. The system is designed to be self-reinforcing, with each component supporting and strengthening the others to create comprehensive barriers against recognition of suppressed historical evidence. The ultimate goal of this suppression isn't simply to hide one particular historical civilization. It's to maintain control over humanity's understanding of its own capabilities and potential. By convincing people that technological advancement has always been gradual and that current limitations are natural rather than artificial, the suppression system ensures that populations won't seek to recover or develop the kinds of technologies that could eliminate the scarcity and dependence that enable centralized control. The evidence for Tartarian civilization represents more than just historical curiosity. It represents proof that human societies have achieved technological capabilities that could transform current economic, political, and social systems in ways that would make traditional forms of institutional control obsolete. This is why the suppression continues with such intensity, and why breaking through these barriers represents one of the most important challenges facing humanity today. The forces responsible for this suppression understand that widespread recognition of Tartarian evidence would inevitably lead to questions about why such technologies were eliminated and what would be possible if humanity regained access to these capabilities. These questions threaten the fundamental basis of current control systems in ways that make continued suppression not just preferable, but absolutely essential for maintaining existing power structures. The scope and persistence of this suppression demonstrates that the stakes involved extend far beyond academic historical interpretation. This is about controlling humanity's access to technologies and knowledge that could eliminate the artificial limitations that enable small groups to maintain authority over entire populations. The Tartarian evidence threatens to expose not just historical deception, but the ongoing technological suppression that keeps humanity dependent on systems designed to extract wealth and energy, rather than provide abundance and freedom. These 10 pieces of evidence prove beyond any reasonable doubt that an advanced civilization called Tartaria once dominated our planet before being systematically erased from history. The architectural marvels surrounding us, the impossible construction timelines, the global energy grid embedded in classical buildings, and the coordinated suppression campaigns all point to the same disturbing conclusion. We are living among the ruins of a society that possessed unlimited free energy, advanced consciousness technologies, and abundance-based economic systems that made traditional power structures impossible to maintain. The forces that orchestrated this erasure understood that Tartarian technology represented an existential threat to scarcity-based control systems. Free energy eliminates utility companies. Consciousness-enhancing architecture makes pharmaceutical manipulation obsolete. Abundance-based economics destroys debt slavery. The systematic destruction of this knowledge wasn't a random historical accident. It was strategic elimination of technologies that could make every human being truly free and independent. The suppression continues today through academic gatekeeping, digital censorship, and linguistic manipulation because the stakes remain as high as they were 2 centuries ago. Recognizing Tartarian civilization means recognizing that our current technological limitations are artificial, that abundance is possible, and that the systems keeping humanity dependent and controlled are unnecessary relics of a manufactured scarcity designed to concentrate power in the hands of the few. The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight, waiting for enough people to see past the carefully constructed narratives that keep us believing we are living in the most advanced civilization in human history. We are not. We are living in the ruins of one.